Israeli security forces are on alert as pro-Palestinian demonstrators in the West Bank mark Land Day. Thousands of troops have been deployed ahead of planned protests across the region. The so-called Global March to Jerusalem commemorates the Israeli decision to confiscate Palestinian-owned land in 1976. And as you can see, tensions are rising. Let's speak straight away to Al Jazeera's Cal Perry, who's covering events in Qalandiya in the West Bank. Cal, just bring us up to date on what is happening.
Well, the clashes began here about an hour ago. I'll step out of the way, Brad, if you want to. You'll see and hear the flashbang grenades that are being used on protesters now. We've seen a few hundred protesters here at Qalandiya. This is where Palestinians and Israelis frequently meet and clash. You can hear now the Israeli army is pushing the protesters back towards Ramallah. What you're looking at from our live picture, this is the occupied West Bank side of the Green Line. And again, this is a place where we frequently see clashes, so not surprising to see them on Land Day. You will, of course, as you mentioned, see clashes potentially in places like the border with Lebanon, the border with Syria. People certainly going to lengths to make sure that doesn't happen, but it seemed almost inevitable that we would see some clashes here in Qalandiya outside of Jerusalem, and indeed inside Jerusalem we should see clashes as well. But as you can see, the Israeli army needing to really put a barrier up here and not allow people through. We do expect, Nick, this to go on all afternoon here.
Right, and some years it is quiet, of course, but last year violence certainly did flare up, didn't it?
Well, this is something, as you allude to, that happens every year, but it's happening this year under different circumstances. Certainly the tension in the region is something that's playing a part in this. Certainly what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Lebanon can sometimes push people towards these borders. And we're seeing right now where we are in Qalandiya, I mean, we do see this fairly frequently, these types of clashes, but these so far seem to be a bit more fierce and they're happening a bit earlier in the day, Nick.
Tell us more about the Global March to Jerusalem. While we look at these scenes of protesting and the Israeli forces just trying to stamp it out, what's the actual march all about?
Well, in 1976, the Palestinians lost over 5,000 acres of land in what now is the occupied West Bank. Excuse me, Nick, they've just used the first round of tear gas here in Qalandiya. So every year since 1976 on this day, we've seen a march towards Jerusalem, a march to try to take back this land. And this is an issue that has far more to do with the land than the event itself. We've seen settlement construction only expanding in the past few months. That is a central issue for not only the negotiating committee here in the Palestinian territories, but for people who continue to lose their land and at what they view as land grabs in both the occupied West Bank and in East Jerusalem. So across the region, that's really the rallying cry, and that's what we've heard from Arab leaders about Land Day. They want people to march to Jerusalem, not only to protect Jerusalem for what they want to see as a greater Palestine, but to make the point that these land grabs are one step too far, Nick.
And they're certainly taking no chances, the Israeli security forces. I understand that in Jerusalem, police barred men younger than 40 from attending Friday prayers.
Yeah, that's something that has happened before. It hasn't. It's not just something that happens on special days like today, where they ban males of a certain age from entering the Temple Mount. We've seen hundreds of Israeli police being deployed into East Jerusalem to try to maintain some kind of order over those Friday prayers. Of course, Friday is a day where you're more likely to see things spark off anyway, and certainly that's something that the Israelis are concerned about. So we've seen a high level of security in East Jerusalem, but again, along what they call this, quote, seam line that separates the occupied West Bank from Israel proper, which is where we are now. They're being very careful not to allow any, as they put it, infiltration. This is something the Israeli army is very worried about. They're very worried this could lead to attacks. So in places where we are, like in Ramallah, you're going to see that heavy level of border police. In places like East Jerusalem, you're going to see a more police action to try to keep things under control. And that's the goal that the Israeli army and the Israeli government has said, is they want to keep this as under control as they possibly can.
And is it a backstory to this, hearing that the Palestinian activist Marwan Barghouti has called for a new wave of civil resistance in the quest for statehood, this from his prison cell, of course?
Yeah, and he's here. He's been here for a few hours this morning at this location, trying to lead some of the organizations, and they're trying to organize these various activist groups to try to, as you said, do things like boycott Israeli products here in the occupied West Bank. So to try to bring a non-violent resistance that will actually bring Israel to the negotiating table, as he puts it, in a proper way. Things like, as I said, not buying Israeli products in the occupied West Bank. But these kind of protests do seem to rally the youth. They do seem to have a lot of appeal across a spectrum that you don't see among Palestinian society a lot these days. Palestinian society is split along so many political lines. So to see a day in which everybody can march, and we're now seeing, I would say, close to 1,000 people in Ramallah, that's pretty rare to see that many people organized. As I said, you see these clashes, they're on again, off again, but this one does seem to have a bit more purpose, Nick.
All right, Cal, leave it there for the time being. I know you'll keep a close eye on the situation, the ongoing situation there in Qalandiya, but for the moment, thanks very much indeed. That's Cal Perry reporting.